What's going on, guys? Welcome in. Today I'm going to be talking about how to help your junior golfer consistently improve and reach their goal of playing Division One golf. If you're new to the channel, this is all we talk about is how to help your child play Division One golf. And if you're a returning subscriber, welcome back in. It's going to be a really good one. So I wanted to talk about this subject because a lot of the time people have goals, right? You're probably watching this video and you have the goal of helping your child play Division One golf. But a lot of the time, most people don't have a plan. They don't know what specifically they need to do in order to accomplish what they want to achieve. And if you're in that situation and you're going out there and you're looking around for, what are you going to need to do? This channel is a fantastic resource for you. It's got an unlimited, a truly massive amount of information that you probably won't find anywhere else on the internet. At least I haven't found it. And so the first thing you really need to have is a plan. You need to have clarity of like, okay, cool. I want to have this goal of playing Division One golf. Where do I start? And for me, with every player I ever work with, I start on this page. This is Junior Golf Scoreboard. This is rankings, under rankings and honors, college signings, and it shows us every player who's recruited back in 2017. And it shows us what their scoring differential was, where they're ranked in their class, which program recruited them, all that stuff. So it allows us to be able to very clearly say, okay, I don't just want to play Division One golf. I want to get to a specific spot. In our case, that's a specific scoring differential, right? And that's a specific scoring differential for either level of golf or a particular program that the student might be interested in, right? That's literal foundation number one, right? And once we've got that, the next piece of this is getting ranked. And your child might be ranked right now, they might be not. Very easy way to do that is just go to tournaments and results, search for tournaments, and look for tournaments in your area that are ranked. You need to play in at least 4 of those in order to be ranked. You'd be shocked at the number of people who want to play Division One golf who aren't even ranked. They aren't even aware that this is a thing. And just by simply going out there and getting ranked, it's going to give you a massive leg up on literally everybody else. So there you go. Just to kind of kick you guys off here. If you guys are watching this video and you do nothing else, go get ranked. Like, please, please, please go get ranked. So crucial, because what you'll be able to see, just to kind of pull up an example of one of the students that I work with here, you'll be able to see their current scoring differential. And that'll be super, super valuable because you'll be able to see, okay, cool. We're trying to get here and we're currently here today, right? Being able to understand that is a massive leg up on literally like everyone that you're competing against, because you are able to take a step away from, hey, what did I shoot in this tournament, to where am I at right now? Where am I trying to get to? And you can like reverse engineer how big is the gap, right? How much per year does your child needs to improve? And here's the next level. You can track this. So if you're, someone after my own heart, you might have a spreadsheet to be able to track where your child is at month over month as far as their scoring differential. And that's a really basic way, but a really impactful way to understand, okay, here's where my child's at. Here's how much they're improving month over month. And you can model that out to say, okay, well, how much are they going to improve year over year? And does that put us on pace to accomplish our goals? That's a massive step forward that you can do by just doing some simple math and getting ranked. So hopefully you guys can go ahead and do that if you're tech savvy, and you can use an Excel spreadsheet, which I'd assume you guys are. You guys watching this channel are probably pretty smart. So I'd anticipate you guys are going to be able to do something like that. If not, that's obviously something that I do for my students and map all this stuff out very clearly. And so, if at any point you guys want my direct help with this stuff, so you guys don't have to think, you just got to go out there and do the work, or more specifically, your child needs to go out there and do the work. There's a link below in the description where you can apply for coaching. So if that's something you're interested in, go ahead and check that out. There's also a pacing calculator below as well, if you wanted to kind of model this out for where your child's at, whether they're ranked or if they're not ranked. I even built it out for you guys. So you can just put in what the average scores that they're shooting are, the distance of the golf courses, and you can model out for yourself how much your child probably needs to improve without even having to get ranked. So, once again, just trying to give you guys some value here. So anyway, continuing on. This is like foundation number one. We want to know where we're at. We want to know where we're going. Once we have those data points, if we could take a magic pill that made us improve, by a certain amount every single year to accomplish our goals, then that would be ideal, right? But we don't have that. That doesn't exist. And so we have the next best thing, right? We want to think about it in really 2 ways. We have our outputs, which are our scores, right? And we have our inputs, which are all the things that we do to produce those scores, right? And so one of the most obvious ones is how we practice and how often we play, right? Those are kind of fairly obvious inputs you would put in to say, if I play more, I will shoot better scores. Or if I practice more, I will shoot better scores. Now, a lot of people, they just kind of say those things in kind of a vague way. They're just like, oh, you need to work really hard. I see some people, they say, oh, you need to work like 20 hours a week on your game, which I think is absurd. Just as far as like all the data and all the students that I've ever looked at, I'm happy to see somebody, come at me and say, hey, here's some data to back up that, 20 is ideal. Like at that point, I will, I will submit to it, right? But I just haven't seen that, and I track a lot of data. So one of the things that I want to kind of start off for you guys, another little free piece of value, is I track all my students' performance, and I track how much they're improving on an annualized basis, right? And so we got an outlier here at 16. We also got an outlier over here close to about 3 shots worse. So, granted, they've only actually gotten worse by about 0.9 shots. But again, I like to annualize just how I was talking about. But another thing that I like to do is I like to track the number of rounds that they've measured over the last 3 months. So I can kind of get a pace or a measurement of how engaged is this player. And as a result, I can measure my own coaching, right? So, I talk about the average player improves by about 3.6 shots per year. Now, I've signed up a number of students over the last couple of months, and to some degree, that's dropped off a little bit, which I'm not super thrilled about. 2.9 is just kind of short of my goals, and God forbid the 1.9 as far as median. I hate seeing that. And so it makes me ask myself as a coach, what do I need to do in order to help these players improve? And so one of the things that I've seen very consistently is the students that I work with really fall into 2 different categories. There are the students who are adherent to the things that I ask them to do, which, to be clear, are not crazy things. And then there are students who do not. And that's just kind of like the way that it is. I wish that I could, make a world where every student does exactly what I ask them to do. But that's just not how the world works. And so if you're watching this video and you're considering, hey, maybe I want to work with this guy, if you're worried about how your child is, able to follow instructions, if that's something that they're kind of like shaky on and you have to convince them on stuff like that, then this probably isn't something you guys want to do. But that's going to be universally true for them, unless you can actually get somebody out there just like be a drill sergeant for them and force them to do stuff. Odds are you're going to have a pretty good sense of is your child going to do the things they're asked to do or not. So anyway, I'm not showing any of the students' names just out of like obviously respect for I'm not trying to embarrass anyone, but I also want to be able to educate you guys. So one of the things that I ask for my students to do is I want 1 practice session per week, and I want 1 round of golf of 18 holes per week. And so if you guys looked at that over a 3-month basis, that's 13 rounds of golf over 3 months, because there are 13 weeks in a quarter, right? And so that allows us to be able to update their practice effectively and make sure that they're consistently up to date and we're getting enough reps out there, right? And you might look at me and be like, oh, well, Connor, like 1 round per week, that doesn't seem like that's enough, right? And you could potentially make that case, but that's my minimum, right? And so just showing these statistics in front of you guys here, we can see the improvement or the annualized improvement for the student and the number of rounds that they've logged in the last 3 months. This one, I will say, is a little bit of an outlier. You see the 21.5, which is a lot. And all this improvement is actually coming like the last 2 months. So if I annualize this player for the entire year over the last 2 months of actually being really dialed in, it took 10 months to really get dialed in and get focused. And, sometimes that happens. And again, that's a risk that, you got to be willing to take to some degree in any type of investment in coaching. And I just want to be upfront with you guys about that. Not every kid comes in just completely dialed in. But again, that's why we adapt and overcome. We continue at this process because we're making that commitment to a long-term goal. We're talking about a multi-year goal. And so sometimes it takes a while for a player to have to look in the mirror enough times to be like, why am I not doing the thing? And they try and do everything else before they actually just do the thing. And that's just part of the development process. I don't want you guys to think that, in order to improve consistently, we have to be perfect. Perfect is not what we aim for. We just want to get better, right? We want to consistently improve. And every player's got different hurdles. Some players, they don't hit it far enough. Some players struggle to follow directions, right? There's all sorts of different challenges that we all face. But nonetheless, you can kind of see this relationship here. Now, so if we segment down and say, okay, well, what's the average of the players who do the minimum that I ask them to do? They're improving by about 4.37 shots per year, which, just for context here, is about the relatively close to the amount that Charlie Woods has improved over the last 4 years. So, he's got his dad as the GOAT, who, in theory could actually be a drill sergeant, like take him out to the golf course. I don't know what their relationship looks like, but Charlie's improved by about 4.5 shots per year. I'd say that's about as good as you're going to do. If you could have your dad be the GOAT and tell you everything you need to know. That's pretty fantastic. Or you could be in a program like mine and just play literally one round of golf per week and just track those statistics, right? That's what that looks like. So players who have at least 13 rounds, they're improving by an average of 4.37 shots, which is why for me as a coach, when I look at this top number, I'm just like, I don't like that. And the only thing that I can take away from this is I need to be more militant about getting the students to do the things that I've asked them to do. And a big degree is just like increasingly getting them more sold on the fact that it works really well and showing them data like this, which I have. And hopefully that improves throughout the summer. But nonetheless, you can see that these statistics are pretty constant, I should say. We got the average here, we got the median here. They're pretty dang close. So if the player's doing the minimum amount of work, they're going to see a pretty significant result. Average number of rounds played is about 19.5, median closer to about 18. So 18, 19 rounds of golf, a little bit more than once per week. It's about 1.5 rounds a week. And that lines up fairly nicely. Let's look at the players who've done less than one round of logged golf per week. And when I say logged, I mean like track their statistics. They're barely improving at all. They hardly improve whatsoever. Average is about 6 total rounds, which is about a third. So it's a round every 3 weeks or something like that. Like, not good. Median's 10, so it's a little bit up. And you'd think, it's like that's not that big of a difference, but you look at the difference between essentially playing about 13 rounds of golf. It's pretty substantial as far as improving and not improving at all. And hopefully this makes sense to you guys because let's think about this here. If I go and work on stuff, either we're in a situation here where we don't play golf, right? Or we're not, let's just say for the sake of this, we're not playing golf. It's going to be very difficult to improve at golf if we don't even play once a week. It's just like you're going to have a very hard time just even getting down to even if you're skilled, even if your golf swing looks good, you're going to have a very hard time just because you don't get the frequency of the shots that you need to hit. You don't get enough reps out there to be able to understand just where are my misses? How far do I hit the ball? What are the conditions? How do I play these different shots? Right? Those are all things you just don't get. You need to play at least one round of golf. And I think that this data kind of proves that out. If we kind of go, beyond that and we look at this a little bit, from another perspective, this also highlights the importance of being able to get that data-driven feedback. Because you could make the argument, I doubt, in this player's case, he's got a scoring differential of, 0.4. I doubt that it's not that it's not a situation where he doesn't play golf. I know for a fact that this student is playing golf, but I also know for a fact that this student doesn't necessarily buy in as much as he needs to. That data is what is important, right? And so all I can do here is just present this information and say, hey, we're struggling here. And, if we look at all these other data points, it seems like you're not doing the thing that gives you the highest probability of success. And so long story short, this video is about the importance of tracking and really understanding, what this process needs to look like and tracking things, right? And so if I tell you, hey, the players who are playing 20 rounds of golf over a 3-month period, which is really a round of 9 holes, and we sandwiched a couple of, let's say you do a practice session, 9 holes, another practice session, 18 holes. That's not that much golf. When I talk about practice session, I mean 2 hours. And to be clear, when I'm working with students, I have very dialed in, practice plans. They're very specific about what they need to go out and do. But anyway, you've got those 2 practice sessions that are about 2 hours, and you've got a 9-hole round of golf, which is going to be about 2 hours. And you got an 18-hole round, which is, maybe 5 hours or 4 hours, depending on how you choose to go ahead and do that. So we're not talking about a massive time commitment, especially if we talk about trying to play Division I golf. There's only 1.6% of junior golfers that'll play Division I golf. And what's the sacrifice that you have to, offer up? It's well, I got a couple practice sessions. I got a couple round of golf. It's not that crazy. And, those players are improving by about, 4.3 shots. Right. And so, that's just first and foremost up front here. Just the impact of tracking and playing enough golf. Long way to make my point, but nonetheless, that's that step. Now, once we are tracking, what does that look like? I'll take an example of one of the students here. And so I like Draw More Circles. I think they're a really great tool. And we're able to segment out practice into practice and tournaments. I also want to be clear, for all these rounds, this is both. This is tournaments and practice, right? So it's just the big picture here is just like we need to track our rounds. That has a massive impact on our ability to improve. And so anyway, continuing on here, we want to be able to track the statistics that are impacting our scores, right? And for the most part, when we look at statistics, most of these are completely useless. I mean, it's just like pars per round. Like I couldn't care less, right? Birdies per round. Like okay, whatever. To be fair, like they're important in their own right. Like putts per hole, like just aren't statistics that really help us a lot as far as predicting what we're going to shoot. Putts per round is another one that people really like that I just don't care about. I don't think it's that impactful. The statistics that I care about are greens and regulation, birdie conversion rate, scrambling, 3 putts, and then penalties off the tee, which is under off the tee section here. And so what I like to do is I like to model those statistics out just based on what a player should shoot if you modeled out all those statistics. I'm not going to go through all the math behind how to do this. If you guys can watch this and just think to yourselves about how to do it, fantastic, good job. Now you can see how you can model this out. But if you're not, again, this is something I give all my students, like literally every single one of them. You can have this, you can play around with the spreadsheet and switch out the numbers and see like, okay, well, how do my statistics change if I change my penalty rate or my greens and regulation? Again, that's something you're interested in. You want my help, application below for coaching. You can go ahead and check that out. If you're a good fit, we'll get on a call, make sure all this stuff makes sense to you guys, and then go over the onboarding process and get you guys rolling. This is not for everyone though, so there's no guarantee that you're going to do that. Or even if we get on a call, it might be in a situation where it's just like, hey, I actually can't help you reach whatever your goals are, and we just won't do the deal. So long story short, it's not for everyone, but if that's something you're interested in, you want stuff like this, you don't have to think. You just want to be able to go out there and do, help your child just go out there and do and execute. Then again, link in the description. So anyway, back into this, what we want to look at is these key statistics. And you want to have a tool like this so you can actually see like, okay, well, if I were to change one of these things, what's going to have the biggest impact, right? If I really focus on it, like, hey, I've got penalties. I don't like penalties. Let me, just so you guys are clear. That's what this looks like over here. I've got penalties. I don't want my penalties to be that high. It's like, all right, cool. Like, how does that impact our improvement? Well, we only improve by, that's not right. So if I just change that one variable, right, we're only going to improve by 0.26 shots, right? People talk about how important short game is. Let's improve that by 5%. We're only going to improve by 0.4 shots. So we want to be able to be data driven with where do we put our attention, right? So we need to be able to track this stuff and say, okay, cool, I'm here. I need to have a plan. Like, what am I going to do? And where are the levers that I need to pull? That's why we need to track our statistics and then say, okay, cool. These are the statistics that need to change in order to score the fastest or improve our scores the fastest, right? Some of these are going to have a big impact. Some of these are not going to have a big impact. If I talk to this player and said, hey, we 3-putt too much at 4%, it's like, are we going to get that down to 1%? Like, probably not. So it's like there's not a lot of like meat on that bone here, so to speak. It doesn't make sense to put a lot of time, attention, and brain power into and trying to improve this statistic, right? We just might want to maintain it. We might want to leave it as is and work on some other statistics, right? But we need to be able to say, okay, this is the area that needs to improve. By the way, this informs all of the lessons that you get, right? A lot of time, kids just get weekly lessons because like that seems like a good idea. And they just get the same lesson over and over again, or they just start working on random stuff that, seems like a good idea at the time, but it's not backed by any measurement, right? So we can't look back and say, hey, this is working or this is not working. It just becomes an emotional thing. We have a bad tournament result and it's like, oh, the sky is falling, right? Rather than saying, okay, here's where we're at and here's where we're trying to improve statistically. And instead of going to the tournament saying, hey, did I, win the tournament or like, how did I finish? It's like, well, we were trying to improve greens regulation. Like, did we do that? And if we didn't, like, what were the shots that we didn't have? And how are we, is that, being accounted for in our practice and we just need to practice a little bit longer? Do we have a large enough sample size to look back and say, hey, is this number actually being moved? That's why it's like so crucial to be able to track these different points, because if you can say that, then you can know with confidence, like, is the thing working? And are we on track? If yes, continue doing it. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to have the stress of like, well, played in this tournament and, I feel like I played really bad. It's like, all right, well, did it affect your junior golf scoreboard? Well, not really that much. Or maybe it did. I don't know. Did you already know that was a problem or is that a new problem? Is your practice already accounting for it? Like, those are all things that you need to know if you want to have consistent, stable progress. And, most players, they just don't do that. They don't have any of those things. The last thing here that I'll throw out to you guys is if you say, hey, I want to practice in a particular way to improve a particular area, yeah, you could go out there and say, I want to try harder, from, try and hit more greens in regulation. I'm just going to have the attention. And to be fair, like there is an amount of progress that you can make just by sheer willpower. But eventually you want to get to a place where your practice is actually based off of your real data. And not every area of your game is going to be weak, right? There's going to be some areas of your game that are really good. And there are going to be some areas of your game that are more impactful than other areas, right? But we want to be able to say, hey, I want to improve my greens regulation. Where am I going to improve my greens regulation from? In this case, I noted for this player, we need to get his par 5 greens regulation up because it's kind of like free shots. For him, if he can get to a specific number, then he's going to hit the green at a much higher clip than he would otherwise. In the same way, he's also got some approach shots that are a little bit underwater as far as just where I'd like to see his on green percentage. So we're going to strategically attack those shots rather than just have him go hit a bunch of shots and be like, try to get better. I don't know. Like we want to get good at that shot. I'm sure everyone watching this video, if you play any level of golf, you can understand where it's like, sometimes you just can't hit your gap wedge very well, but you can hit your 8-iron really, really well. And that's just, that's how it is. When you don't play as much golf, you're not as experienced as, PGA Tour player. You're going to have different kind of idiosyncrasies in your game, and you want to make sure practice is tailored to those things. And part of the reason I'm able to get the results with students who actually do what I tell them to do is because I've proven this stuff out. I know these drills work. I know that the way that I present them to a player, they're like, okay, cool, I understand. I go out there and execute and I get better because I've been able to see so much of that data. And I know, okay, if I plug this in, I'm going to get this result. And if I don't see this result moving, I know exactly where I need to go with this player and what they're going to need to improve. Versus if you don't track any of this stuff, how are you supposed to know? Be like, hey, we're working hard on our putting. It's not working. Well, I guess we need to get a new coach, right? And like to some degree, that's true. You might need somebody who's a little bit more analytical. But to some degree, it's like you're not tracking. It's like you're just making those decisions based off of emotions. If you've had any level of success in your life, you know that that's not how things work. We've got to be based on some objective metrics. We can't be jumping around based on how we feel on a day-to-day basis. We need to be able to sit back, look at the numbers and say, like, what is this telling us? And what are the inputs that we've been putting in? And what adjustments can we make to those inputs to get better outputs? And then go ahead and execute on that and then reevaluate in the future. And so, this player is a great example of that. We still need to update this for this quarter here, but you guys can even see here, he was at a scoring differential of 5.44. Now he's at a scoring differential of 3.81, and it's like, there's nothing too crazy here I'm showing you guys. I understand this is a little bit dry as well, but the reality is there is such an impact of knowing where we're trying to get to, where we're at right now, how big that gap is, how fast we need to improve, and then strategically saying, okay, I'm going to take these specific actions. I'm going to play this much. I'm going to do these drills, and I'm going to adjust those drills over time as the needs that I have in my game are adjusting. And so long story short, hopefully this heavily sells you guys on the importance of just starting to track some of these things. You don't have to track all of them all at once. Obviously you're going to improve faster if you're able to track them all at once. But, once again, just the value of being able to say, okay, here's what we're going to go do and execute and evaluate, is it working or not, is massive as far as the overall improvement potential. So once again, if this is something you want help with for your child and you want me to do all of this work for them, show them exactly where they need to, where they need to practice, what drills they need to do, what adjustments they need to their mindset or their strategy on the golf course and everything, and that they can play at least one round of golf per week and track it, then I'd highly encourage you to check out the application, go through that process. Once again, you won't be able to sign up if I don't see that your child has a high probability of playing Division I golf. So, or we have a conversation where it's just like, hey, we just want to achieve our highest level of success. If that's the case, not everyone has to play Division I golf, but for the most part, this is something that is very, very serious. And, at some level, the aspiration should be to play Division I golf. It's definitely not for beginners. If your child's just getting started, this is not for them. But if they're in that position where they're stuck, they're putting in the work, that they're putting in that minimum level of work. And if they just had a little bit more guidance, then they would really be able to crush it. Then once again, highly encourage you guys to check out that application, book a call, and we can talk about where your child's at and what they'll need to do to be successful. And again, if you're not sure, if you want to start checking stuff out, highly encourage you guys to download the pacing calculator to kind of see where your child's at and see what's possible, and then you can kind of make decisions from there. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. If you're new here, go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed it, and leave a like. It does help push it out to more people in the algorithm. So hope you guys enjoyed. Talk soon.